What if a single sip could change everything? A billionaire on the brink of losing it all is offered the impossible: drink this and you will walk. Could it be true? Watch until the end to witness the unbelievable transformation. Don't forget to subscribe for more shocking stories. Nathaniel Voss sat motionless in the wheelchair beneath a withering maple tree in Central Park. Once a titan of industry, a man whose name commanded respect and whose wealth overflowed into the most exclusive circles, now he was reduced to this. A man without a future, abandoned by his own body and the very world he had built. It had been 17 months since the accident, 17 months since the drunk driver had flipped his SUV, severing not just his spine but his connection to the life he once knew. The pain in his legs had long since faded, replaced by a numb, unfeeling emptiness. But it was the emotional toll that truly broke him. Every day, his business empire crumbled. Partners dropped out, investments plummeted, and the phone calls he once received in a constant stream of meetings now went unanswered. Nathaniel was no longer the man people turned to for answers. He was a forgotten relic. Elena, his wife, tried her best to hold them both together. But the strain of caring for him, watching him slowly fade away, wore her down to the bone. She no longer smiled, no longer laughed. Her eyes, once full of life, were now haunted by fatigue and sorrow. Nathaniel hated seeing her this way, knowing he couldn't fix it, couldn't change anything, and so, every morning, he sat in his wheelchair, staring up at the sky, whispering the same words to God: "Why did you do this to me?" But there was no answer. Only the wind, the rustling leaves, and the empty space between him and the world he had once known. That it was the usual routine for Nathaniel that morning, sitting alone, watching the world move around him while he remained stuck in time. The vibrant energy of Central Park, filled with people jogging, walking their dogs, and chatting in groups, seemed to mock his stillness. His mind wandered, drifting between anger, regret, and a sense of overwhelming loneliness. He wondered if his life would ever have meaning again. What was the point of this existence, sitting by the side of the road, watching others live their lives while he was left behind? As he contemplated this, a voice broke through his thoughts. "Thirsty, mister?" Nathaniel snapped his head to the side, blinking in confusion. Standing in front of him was a young boy, no older than 7, wearing worn-out denim overalls with one strap hanging loose. His bare feet were dusty from walking the park's paths, and his face was a mix of innocence and something deeper, an old wisdom that Nathaniel couldn't quite place. The boy held a large glass bottle in his hands. The liquid inside was a strange, shimmering blue that glowed faintly in the sunlight, like some kind of mystery juice. Nathaniel squinted at it, his first instinct being skepticism. "I'm not in the mood, kid," Nathaniel grumbled, turning away slightly. The boy didn't retreat. Instead, he took a step closer, his gaze unwavering. "I didn't ask if you're in the mood. I asked if you're thirsty." Nathaniel stared at the boy, who seemed so out of place in this upscale park, so different from the businessmen in their suits and the well-to-do families strolling nearby. He felt a pang of irritation, the kind of irritation that came from being reminded of just how far he had fallen. "What's in that?" Nathaniel asked dryly, trying to brush off the encounter. "Some kind of street scam? Poison?" The boy didn't flinch. His smile remained calm and unwavering. "Number. But it's not really about the drink. It's about the belief." Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. "Belief in what?" he asked, skeptical, his curiosity piqued despite himself. "In God," the boy said simply. "The one you're mad at every day." Nathaniel froze. He hadn't spoken about his anger toward God in months. But the boy saw it, saw right through him. The words hung heavy in the air, his disbelief mixing with a strange sense of being seen in a way he hadn't felt in a long time. Nathaniel stared at the boy, his heart racing. The words the child had spoken hung in the air, the weight of them almost suffocating. He had spent so many months cursing God, blaming him for his fall from grace, for the pain, the emptiness. He had even questioned his faith, wondering if it had all been for nothing. His life had fallen apart in a way he never imagined, and the anger he had felt toward God was consuming. The boy, this stranger who seemed so innocent and carefree, was the first person who had acknowledged the darkness inside him, and it unsettled him. "You don't know anything about me," Nathaniel muttered, shaking his head. "You don't know what I've lost." The boy just smiled, his eyes full of a quiet knowing. "I know you sit here every day, staring at the sky, asking the same question," the boy said softly. "I know your wife is carrying the weight of 2 people, and I know you haven't been able to find a way to help her. But you can start by helping yourself." Nathaniel clenched his fists, feeling a surge of frustration. "How can I help myself when I'm stuck like this?" he spat. I can't even walk. My body is useless. The boy's gaze didn't waver. But you're not just your body, mister. You're more than that. You just have to believe again. Believe in something bigger than yourself. Nathaniel scoffed, his patience running thin. Believe in what, exactly? The boy held up the bottle, its blue liquid shimmering in the sunlight. In God, and in the power to heal. Drink this, and you will walk. Nathaniel blinked, taken aback. The words were impossible. He didn't believe in miracles, not anymore. But something in the boy's eyes, something about his calm, unwavering presence, made him pause. He glanced down at the bottle again, the liquid glowing faintly. Part of him wanted to laugh, to dismiss the boy as just another crazy street vendor. But there was something different about this encounter. The desperation, the hope buried deep inside him, made him hesitate. The boy was offering something that Nathaniel had long since given up on, the chance to believe in the impossible. His fingers trembled as he reached out, unsure of what to do next. Nathaniel hesitated, his fingers inches from the bottle. For a moment, everything seemed to pause. The world, the people, the park around him, all held in a suspended silence. His mind raced, swirling with doubt and disbelief. The idea of drinking from this strange bottle, of putting faith in something so foreign, was absurd. He had lived his life based on facts, on what he could see and touch. Miracles? They were for the weak, for those who believed in fairy tales. But as his eyes locked onto the boy's calm expression, something shifted inside him. A quiet voice whispered in the back of his mind, "What if this is your chance?" He swallowed hard and, with a shaky hand, unscrewed the cap of the bottle. The liquid inside was cool to the touch, but its color was unlike anything he had ever seen. Blue, almost glowing, shimmering in the sunlight. Nathaniel sniffed it, but there was no distinct scent. Just something herbal, faintly unfamiliar. "You really expect me to believe this will fix everything?" Nathaniel muttered, his voice tinged with sarcasm. The boy didn't respond. He just watched, as if waiting for Nathaniel to make his own choice. The air around them felt heavy, charged with an energy that Nathaniel couldn't quite explain. He closed his eyes, trying to push the flood of doubts from his mind. Then, in one swift motion, he took a small sip. The liquid was surprisingly smooth, the taste unfamiliar but not unpleasant. It slid down his throat, leaving a cooling sensation behind. Nothing happened. No immediate rush of energy, no miracle unfolding in his body. Nathaniel opened his eyes, staring at his legs as if willing them to move, but they remained still. The world continued around him, indifferent. He felt the bitter sting of disappointment creeping in, but before he could say anything, the boy's voice broke the silence. "Try again," he said simply. Nathaniel frowned. "What are you talking about? It's just some drink." The boy smiled. "It's not about the drink. It's about belief. Drink it again, and believe." Something inside Nathaniel shifted. For the first time in months, a flicker of hope, fragile, but real, stirred within him. He looked down at the bottle, still half full. This was ridiculous. This was stupid. But what did he have to lose? With a slow, uncertain motion, he raised the bottle to his lips and took another sip. Nathaniel lowered the bottle, his hands trembling slightly. The second sip had done nothing to alter his condition, or so it seemed. His legs remained just as they had been for the past 17 months, immobile, lifeless, trapped in the wheelchair that had become his world. He let out a bitter laugh, one tinged with the harsh edge of disbelief and regret. "This is a joke," he muttered to himself. "A sad, cruel joke." The boy said nothing in response. He simply stood there, eyes fixed on Nathaniel, his expression unchanged. Nathaniel glanced at the boy one last time before his gaze shifted back to his legs. He had no reason to believe in this. No reason to believe that anything could change. He had tried everything: therapy, medicine, hope. Yet here he was, still stuck in the same place. "I should have known," Nathaniel whispered, shaking his head. "Miracles don't happen to people like me." But then, just as he was about to dismiss the encounter entirely, something changed. It was subtle, almost imperceptible. His right leg twitched. The movement was so slight, so small, that he almost didn't notice it. But there it was, a faint, involuntary movement, as if his body was awakening from a long, frozen sleep. His eyes widened in disbelief. Was it a muscle spasm? A trick of his mind? He reached down with trembling hands and placed them gently on his thigh. The muscle responded, softly, almost imperceptibly. But it responded. A tear welled up in Nathaniel's eye as he pressed harder, willing the sensation to be real. Did that just happen? He whispered to himself. The boy stood still, watching him. It's only the beginning, he said, his voice low and reassuring. Nathaniel couldn't speak. His breath quickened as he shifted his weight, barely daring to hope that he had truly felt it. His mind raced, trying to grasp what was happening. Could it be possible? Could a simple drink and a few words have made his leg twitch after all this time? His heart pounded in his chest, and he slowly reached for the bottle again. This time, the drink didn't seem so absurd. He took another sip, his hands trembling less than before. He closed his eyes as the cool liquid touched his lips, hoping, wishing for more than just a twitch. A sudden rush of emotion filled him as he whispered under his breath, "What if this is the miracle I've been waiting for?" Nathaniel sat in the wheelchair, staring down at his legs, still unsure whether the sensation he had felt was real or just a trick of his mind. His body remained motionless, but the memory of that faint twitch lingered, haunting him with a possibility he had long since given up on. The air around him felt charged with a strange energy, as if something invisible was stirring just beneath the surface of his reality. He reached down and placed both hands on his thighs, feeling the warmth of the muscles beneath his touch. He couldn't help but wonder, what if it was real? His mind kept returning to the boy's words, "It's not about the drink. It's about belief." But what did that mean? Nathaniel closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and exhaled slowly. He had to try again. He had to believe. He leaned forward slightly in the chair, feeling the familiar weight of his legs, the weight of all his failures. His heart pounded in his chest as he concentrated, willing his body to move. It was ridiculous. It was impossible. But what if? What if? The room seemed to quiet as Nathaniel closed his eyes once more, shutting out everything around him, focusing solely on that small flicker of hope he had felt. He wasn't going to waste this. Slowly, he focused on his right leg, imagining it moving, willing it to do something, anything. His thoughts were frantic, but a quiet determination began to settle over him. He clenched his fists, feeling the heat of his palms against his thighs, urging his body to listen. Then, as if in response to his call, the impossible happened. His right leg moved, just a few inches at first, but enough to shock him. Nathaniel's eyes flew open, and he gasped. His leg had shifted. It wasn't much, but it was something. A movement. A sign that something had changed. The reality of it began to sink in, and a wave of disbelief washed over him. It's real. It's actually real. His heart raced as he tried to steady himself. He raised the other leg, focusing intently on it. The same sensation, the same faint stirring. Then, without fully understanding how it had happened, he shifted his weight and pushed himself up from the wheelchair. Slowly, cautiously, he stood. His legs trembled beneath him, barely able to support his weight, but they held. For the first time in months, he was standing on his own 2 feet. The tears came unbidden, rushing to his eyes as he balanced there, breathless and overwhelmed. I'm standing. His voice was hoarse, barely a whisper, but it felt like the loudest thing in the world. Nathaniel stepped forward, 1 foot in front of the other, though the movement was shaky, tentative. It wasn't much, but it was everything. The boy had been right. He had believed, and for the first time, it felt like the impossible was within reach. Nathaniel stood there, his legs barely able to support his weight, his entire body trembling with the effort. His mind raced, trying to process what was happening. It was impossible. It couldn't be real. Yet, every time he shifted his weight, his legs held him. A small, but undeniable triumph. 1 step. 2 steps. His heart pounded in his chest, but the fear that gripped him was different now. It wasn't fear of being stuck in the wheelchair anymore. It was the fear of failure, the fear of falling and losing everything he had just gained. He felt his knees wobble as he tried to take another step. The movement was slow, unsteady. His legs felt like rubber beneath him, as if they had forgotten how to hold his weight. The boy's words echoed in his mind, "It's not about the drink. It's about belief." Belief. That was the key, wasn't it? The drink was only the catalyst. But it was his belief, his willingness to trust in the possibility of change, that had made the difference. Still, doubt lingered in the back of his mind. What if this was just a fluke? What if, once the shock wore off, his legs would betray him again? The thought made him stop in his tracks. His mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. I can't fall again. I can't lose this. His eyes searched the empty park around him, as if looking for some kind of reassurance. But there was only silence. The boy was gone. He was alone. Just as quickly as the hope had surged within him, the fear of it slipping away took over. It was easier to stay in the dark, easier to accept the idea that he was broken, that nothing could ever change. But this? This new reality was terrifying. What if he wasn't meant to walk again? What if this was just the universe playing some cruel joke? He couldn't help but look down at his legs again. The faint tremor that still lingered in his limbs reminded him how fragile everything was. He had spent so much of his life relying on his mind, on his strength, on his control. But now, the real work had just begun. Learning to believe again, learning to trust his body after everything it had been through, it was a whole new kind of struggle. And yet, for the first time in months, Nathaniel didn't feel like a complete failure. He had taken the first step. And maybe that was enough for now. Nathaniel's legs wobbled as he took another unsteady step forward. The park was still bustling with life, but to him, it felt as though everything had slowed down. His focus was entirely on the movement of his legs, each tentative step a reminder that what had once seemed impossible was now within his grasp. His breath was shallow, each exhale a sign of both relief and fear. The fear of failure still lingered, but it was no longer all-encompassing. The hope that had long been buried inside him began to resurface, slowly but surely. He had to focus. He had to keep moving. He looked down at his legs, the muscles in his thighs tightening as he shifted his weight again. This time, the tremor in his limbs was less pronounced. His body felt more grounded, more present. Nathaniel paused for a moment, just standing there, absorbing the reality of what was happening. A part of him wanted to rush it, to push himself further, faster, but he knew he had to take it slow. The fear of pushing too hard and undoing all his progress weighed heavily on him. And yet, there was something different now. He wasn't just physically standing. He was standing in a way that felt new. His legs still had the stiffness of someone who had been immobile for over a year, but the sensations of movement were returning. There was life in them again. He could feel it, as though the blood was flowing through his veins, reconnecting him to the world around him. A small, tearful smile crept onto his face. He took another step, more confident now, the wobble in his knees less pronounced. With each movement, the fear began to lessen, replaced by a quiet sense of wonder. This isn't a dream, he thought. It's real. The sky above him seemed clearer, the sounds of the city around him less harsh, as if the world itself had softened. For the first time since the accident, Nathaniel didn't feel like an outsider. He didn't feel stuck, trapped in a body that no longer belonged to him. He felt human again. He glanced around, searching for the boy who had appeared from nowhere, the one who had given him this strange, inexplicable gift. But he was gone. The boy was nowhere to be found, as if he had never existed. Nathaniel shook his head in disbelief, unsure of what he had just experienced. But despite the confusion, one thing was clear: whatever had happened, it had changed him. There was a second chance, a chance to live again, to not just exist but to truly live. Days passed, and Nathaniel's steps grew more sure. What had started as tentative, shaky movements soon became more fluid. He could feel his muscles growing stronger, responding to his commands. Each morning, he would wake up, take a deep breath, and brace himself for the challenge of standing. But every time he tried, his body responded. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. His legs weren't completely healed, but they were moving. For the first time in 17 months, Nathaniel felt like he was reclaiming something of himself, something he had thought lost forever. It wasn't just his ability to walk. It was the spark of hope that had ignited inside him. The flame that had been extinguished by pain, frustration, and endless days of helplessness. The belief that something could change. Elena noticed it too. At first, she thought it was just a fluke, maybe his body was adjusting to the therapy, or perhaps his mind had been playing tricks on him. But as the days went on, she couldn't ignore the changes. Nathaniel was getting stronger, physically and emotionally. She saw the way he carried himself now. There was purpose in his steps, something she hadn't seen in him for a long time. The man who had been so defeated, so full of rage and self-loathing, was beginning to return to her. And with that, a sense of peace returned to their home. The strain between them, though still present, was fading. They spoke more often now, shared more moments together, as if Nathaniel's healing wasn't just physical. It was emotional, spiritual. He had begun to talk about things they hadn't discussed in months: his faith, his doubts, his hopes for the future. He had finally started to face the fear that had paralyzed him for so long, the fear of being vulnerable. The fear of accepting that he wasn't in control. It was the fear of believing again. Nathaniel sat in his favorite chair by the window one evening, looking out at the skyline as the sun dipped behind the buildings. His legs ached, a constant reminder of the journey he was on. But there was peace in the ache. He had been through so much, and he wasn't done yet. But this? This felt like the beginning of something new. He thought about the boy, the stranger who had appeared from nowhere with his strange blue drink. He had never seen the boy again, and no one else seemed to remember him. But in his heart, Nathaniel knew. That boy had been the key to his recovery. Not the drink, not the miracle, but the belief he had sparked within him. Nathaniel closed his eyes and whispered, "Thank you." It wasn't just for the drink. It was for the chance to believe again, to see the possibility of change. To feel hope when he thought it was gone. He was walking now. And with every step, he was walking toward a new life. Nathaniel's progress didn't go unnoticed. As the days turned into weeks, and his walking became more stable, he felt a surge of newfound purpose, not just in his own life, but in the lives of those around him. His physical recovery, though remarkable, was only the beginning. Nathaniel had spent years chasing success, wealth, and power, but now, he was learning that true fulfillment came from something far more profound. It came from giving, from connecting with others. With each step he took, both physically and emotionally, he felt the need to extend the gift he had received to others. It started small, volunteering at a local shelter, helping with the tasks he once thought beneath him. At first, it was awkward. He had spent so much time isolated in his own world that the idea of working alongside others felt foreign. But the more he did it, the more natural it became. Nathaniel didn't have all the answers, but he could offer his time, his presence, and his compassion. He watched as children, who had once given up on hope, began to smile again. He read to them, fixed broken furniture, and helped clean up the space. Every day, he witnessed the power of small acts of kindness and the ripple effect they had on those around him. Nathaniel started a program at the shelter called Steps Forward, a way to help children from broken homes build resilience, provide them with the tools they needed to rise above their circumstances. He gave them notebooks to write their thoughts, shoes to walk in, and medical checkups they couldn't afford on their own. He even built a small garden behind the shelter, a place for the kids to plant seeds and watch them grow, just like their own potential. One afternoon, as the sun began to set, Elena arrived with lunch. Her face had changed too. She looked healthier, lighter, her eyes no longer weighed down by the exhaustion she had carried for so long. Nathaniel smiled at her, his heart swelling with pride as she sat beside him under the shade of a tree, watching two boys arguing over a soccer ball. "You know," Elena said softly, "I used to think you hated God." Nathaniel turned to her, the corners of his mouth turning up. "I did," he admitted. "I thought he hated me first. But I was wrong." He glanced out at the children, their laughter filling the air. "I see it now. He didn't leave me. He was just waiting for me to stop looking at myself and start looking at others." Elena rested her head on his shoulder, and they sat in peaceful silence for a while, watching the children play, feeling the warmth of the sun as it dipped lower in the sky. Nathaniel had been given a second chance, an opportunity to live again, not just for himself, but for others. And in doing so, he realized that the boy in the park, the one who had offered him the drink, had given him more than the ability to walk. He had given him a reason to live, a reason to believe. Weeks passed, and Nathaniel's life had taken a turn he never could have anticipated. He continued his work at the shelter, his involvement growing deeper as he connected with the children and the community around him. His physical progress was nothing short of miraculous. He was walking without assistance now, his legs growing stronger with each step. But it wasn't just his legs that were healing. His heart, once weighed down by anger, bitterness, and the crushing weight of lost dreams, was now lighter. He had found a new purpose, one rooted in service, in giving back, in making a difference in the lives of others. Yet, despite all the progress, despite the newfound sense of peace in his life, one question lingered. The boy. The strange, barefoot child who had appeared in the park with the glowing blue bottle, who had handed Nathaniel the key to his recovery, who was he? Nathaniel had searched the park, asked around, even tried to find out more about the boy, but no one seemed to remember him. It was as if he had never existed. It baffled him. He knew what he had experienced, knew the difference it had made in his life. The boy had changed everything, but he was gone, vanished into the ether. Nathaniel couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the boy's presence than just a strange encounter. Could he have been an angel? A messenger? Or was he simply a symbol, a sign, something meant to make Nathaniel believe again, to open his eyes to the possibility of something greater than himself? As Nathaniel sat in the park one afternoon, lost in thought, he glanced at the spot where he had first met the boy. The bench was empty now, just as it had been for weeks. He sighed, feeling both grateful and unsettled. "Who were you?" he whispered to the wind. He didn't know if he'd ever have an answer, but in that moment, he realized something important. It didn't matter. The boy had given him what he needed most, the belief that anything was possible, that change was within reach, and that life was worth living again. Nathaniel smiled softly to himself. The boy might be gone, but his message lived on. And that was enough. Time moved on, and life continued to unfold in ways Nathaniel had never imagined. His days were filled with purpose, and the work he had started at the shelter grew beyond anything he could have anticipated. The Steps Forward program became a beacon of hope for children who had once felt lost, providing them with not just the physical resources they needed, but the emotional strength to overcome their own battles. Nathaniel had become a mentor, a guide, someone who understood the pain of being broken and the healing that came from helping others. He could see the change in the children's eyes, the same spark that had ignited within him, the same hope that had been resurrected in his heart. He watched as they planted seeds in the garden, tended to them with care, and saw them grow. It was a symbol of everything he had learned, that life, like those plants, could be nurtured, could be healed, could rise again even after being broken. Elena, too, had found a new rhythm in their life together. She was healthier, lighter, more at peace. The weight of the years they had spent struggling, wondering if they would ever be whole again, had been lifted. They had found a new kind of love, a love rooted in understanding, in shared experiences, and in the quiet moments of appreciation for each other. One evening, as they sat together on the porch of their apartment, watching the sunset, Elena rested her head on Nathaniel's shoulder. He smiled, his heart full, but there was still a small part of him that couldn't quite let go of the mystery of the boy. He never spoke about it to Elena, but the question still lingered in his mind. Who had he been? What had he really given me? But as he looked out at the life they had built, he realized that the boy's gift was not something to be explained. It wasn't about knowing the answers. It was about the belief the boy had awakened within him, the belief that there was something greater, something more powerful than he could ever understand. Nathaniel had believed again. And that belief had changed everything. As he stood up, ready to head inside with Elena, he glanced back at the park, the place where it all began. The boy was still gone, but Nathaniel no longer felt the need for answers. The lesson had been learned. And now, he was living it. You were right, Nathaniel whispered to the wind. It was about belief. And it has made all the difference. With that, he turned away, ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that the rest of his journey would be filled with hope, purpose, and the unwavering belief that miracles, in their own way, could happen. And if he ever saw a child in need again, he would stop, just as the boy had stopped for him, and offer a hand. Because Nathaniel knew now, sometimes